Have you ever had the feeling that you're living in an era where everything is accelerating beyond your capacity to understand? That deep unease that no matter how much you try to keep up with the changes around you, something fundamental is escaping your control, as if the world were transforming at a speed that surpasses not only your individual capacity for adaptation, but humanity's collective ability to consciously process what's happening. Perhaps you feel this when you look at the news and realize that each week brings technological advances that seemed like science fiction just a few years ago, or when you notice that the artificial intelligence tools you use at work are fundamentally different from those that existed just 6 months ago. This feeling isn't paranoia or unfounded anxiety. It's the intuitive recognition that we're crossing a historical inflection point that may be more determinative for our species' future than any other period we've ever lived through. And 2026 could be the year when this transformation reaches a point of irreversibility. Think for a moment about the great turning points in human history. The agricultural revolution, which took us from nomadic life and established us in permanent communities, took thousands of years to complete. The Industrial Revolution, which radically transformed our relationship with work and production, unfolded over more than a century. Even the Information Revolution, which began in the second half of the 20th century, had decades to mature before completely restructuring how we communicate, work, and relate to each other. But what we're experiencing now is qualitatively different. We're not just witnessing a gradual change in technology or society, we're witnessing the simultaneous convergence of multiple technological revolutions, each with the potential to redefine fundamental aspects of human experience. And this convergence is happening at a speed that challenges our evolutionary capacity for conscious adaptation. Artificial intelligence, which for decades remained in the domain of academic speculation and science fiction, is now becoming a daily presence in our lives, not just as a useful tool, but as a force that's beginning to question basic assumptions about what it means to be intelligent, creative, and even human. Biotechnology is bringing us closer to the ability to edit our own genetic code with a precision that would theoretically allow us to design improved versions of ourselves. Quantum computing promises to solve problems we consider intractable, potentially unlocking secrets of physics and chemistry that could revolutionize our understanding of material reality. And all of this is happening simultaneously, creating possibilities for interaction and mutual amplification that even experts cannot completely predict. But why specifically 2026? It's not an arbitrary date chosen for drama. It's the result of careful analysis of technological, economic, and social cycles that are converging in an unprecedented way. First, 2026 marks approximately 2 years since the mainstream explosion of generative artificial intelligence, a period that historically has proven crucial for the consolidation and institutionalization of new disruptive technologies. It's enough time for initial experiments and adaptations to mature into systematic applications, but not yet so much time as to allow complete regulation and understanding of long-term impact. Second, several fundamental technologies that had been developing in parallel for decades have begun to reach levels of maturity and accessibility that make them ready for mass integration. Quantum computing, which long remained restricted to research laboratories, is approaching practical applications. CRISPR biotechnology and its variations are becoming more precise and accessible. Robotics is finally achieving levels of dexterity and autonomy that allow their meaningful integration into complex human environments. When we observe the history of human transformations, we realize that truly decisive moments are not those when a single innovation emerges, but those when multiple innovations meet and mutually amplify their effects. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about steam engines. It was about the convergence of new energy sources, new materials, new transportation methods, new financial systems, and new forms of social organization. Similarly, what makes 2026 potentially unique is not the isolated advance of artificial intelligence or biotechnology, but the way these technologies are beginning to influence and potentiate each other, creating emergent possibilities that transcend the sum of their individual parts. Artificial intelligence, for example, is dramatically accelerating biotechnology research, enabling the analysis of massive amounts of genomic data that would be impossible to process without advanced computational assistance. In turn, insights from neuroscience and biology are informing the development of more sophisticated and efficient AI architectures. Quantum computing promises to solve optimization problems that could revolutionize both AI model training and the modeling of complex biological systems. And all these technologies together are creating new possibilities for brain-machine interfaces, potentially altering our own cognitive capacity and our fundamental relationship with information and knowledge. But perhaps the most profound and disturbing aspect of this convergence is not technological, but philosophical. For the first time in human history, we're developing technologies that don't just amplify our existing physical or cognitive capabilities, but that question fundamental categories we use to understand our identity and our position in the world. Artificial intelligence is questioning what it means to be intelligent and creative. Biotechnology is questioning what it means to be natural versus artificial in our own biological constitution. Quantum computing is questioning our intuitive understanding of physical reality and causality. And the convergence of these technologies is questioning the very boundary between human and non-human, between mind and machine, between natural and artificial. This creates what we could call a collective ontological crisis. We no longer know exactly what we are in relation to what we're creating. Throughout all of human history, even in the most radical transformations, we maintained a clear distinction between us, the tool creators, and the tools we created. Now we're creating entities that, in some domains, surpass our capabilities and that seem to exhibit characteristics we traditionally associated exclusively with consciousness and human intelligence. Moreover, we're beginning to modify our own biological and cognitive constitution, blurring the line between what we are naturally and what we choose to become technologically. This isn't just an abstract academic or philosophical question. It's a question with profound practical implications for how we organize our societies, our economies, and our personal lives. If we no longer know exactly what it means to be human, in contrast to the artificial intelligences we create? How do we structure educational systems that prepare people for a future where this distinction may be increasingly irrelevant? If we don't know where to draw the line between acceptable human enhancement and problematic human modification, how do we create public policies and ethical structures that guide us through these choices? If we don't fully understand the long-term implications of the technologies we're developing, how do we make responsible decisions about which direction to pursue? What makes 2026 particularly crucial is that this may be the last moment when we still have the opportunity to consciously influence the direction of these transformations. There's something that technology scholars call a lock-in point, a moment when technological and social trajectories become sufficiently established that course changes become exponentially more difficult. We are not saying that after 2026 there will be no more choices, but that available choices will be increasingly constrained by decisions made in this crucial period. The technological infrastructures we build now, the regulatory precedents we establish, the social norms we develop in response to these new realities, all of this will create a momentum that will be increasingly difficult to alter. Think of the analogy with urban development. When a city is growing, there's a period when it's still relatively easy to plan where the main streets will go, where the center will be, how the distribution between residential and commercial areas will work. But once the basic infrastructure is established, subsequent changes become progressively more expensive and complex. You can renovate individual buildings, but it's much harder to reconfigure the city's fundamental layout. Similarly, we're now in the equivalent period of urban planning for our technological civilization. The decisions we make about how to integrate AI into our institutions, about how to regulate biotechnology, about how to structure the relationship between humans and machines, these decisions will create the infrastructure on which the future will be built. But there's another even more fundamental aspect at play. We're not just creating technologies that will change how we do things. We're creating technologies that will change who we are. And once we begin to modify our own cognitive and biological nature, we enter territory where the very categories we use to evaluate future changes may be altered. If we develop brain-computer interfaces that dramatically amplify our processing capacity, our priorities, values, and way of making decisions, may be fundamentally altered if we modify our genetic constitution to eliminate certain diseases or amplify certain capabilities. Our perspectives on what constitutes a good life may be radically different. And if we create artificial intelligences that are not only more intelligent than us, but that think in fundamentally different ways, our understanding of what is possible or desirable may be completely reconfigured. This creates what we could call a paradox of existential decision-making. We need to make decisions about our future using categories of thought that may be inadequate for understanding the consequences of those very decisions. It's like trying to navigate using a map that we know will become obsolete as soon as we begin the journey, and the time for this navigation is running out rapidly. Each month that passes, technologies become more powerful, more integrated into our lives, and more difficult to reverse or redirect. I want to pause for a moment to ask, do you feel this pressure too? This sensation that we're being carried along by technological and social currents that are simultaneously exciting and terrifying, full of promises and threats that we can barely distinguish? Do you have the impression that the really important decisions about the future are being made in corporate boardrooms and research laboratories where you have no voice, but whose consequences will fundamentally define the kind of world you and your children will live in? I know many of us keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps for fear of seeming technophobic in a world that celebrates each new innovation as unequivocal progress. But your concerns are valid and shared by more people than you imagine. If this feeling resonates with you, leave in the comments, "My biggest concern about our technological future is..." Your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these collective challenges instead of pretending they don't exist. But we don't want this analysis to become just an exercise in existential anxiety. Recognizing the magnitude and urgency of the challenges we face can be the first step toward developing wiser and more deliberate approaches to confronting them. And although 2026 may be a crucial inflection point, this doesn't mean we're mere passive spectators of forces beyond our control. It means that the window for conscious and deliberate influence is narrowing, but hasn't completely closed yet. One of the most important lessons from history is that the most successful technological and social transformations are not those that happen fastest, but those that manage to integrate technical innovation with cultural and institutional wisdom. The Industrial Revolution, for example, wasn't just a matter of inventing more efficient machines. It was also about developing new forms of social organization, new educational structures, new legal systems, and new cultural norms that allowed societies to benefit from technological innovations without being destroyed by them. Similarly, our success in navigating the current technological convergence will depend not only on our capacity to innovate technically, but on our capacity to innovate socially, culturally, and institutionally. This means developing new forms of education that prepare people not just to use new technologies, but to think critically about their implications and consciously participate in decisions about how to integrate them into their lives. It means creating democratic and participatory structures that allow decisions about technologies with civilizational impact to be made with broad input from society, not just from technical specialists and corporate executives. It means developing cultural and philosophical traditions that help us maintain perspective on what we value as human beings amid accelerated technological transformations. And it means creating economic and political institutions that ensure the benefits of technological advances are shared broadly rather than concentrated in small groups of capital holders and technical expertise. But perhaps more fundamentally, it means developing what we could call technological wisdom, a capacity to discern not just what we can do technologically, but what we should do. For the first time in history, our technological power is approaching our capacity to imagine. We're developing the ability to realize transformations that previously existed only in myths and science fiction. This is simultaneously extraordinary and dangerous. It's extraordinary because it offers us unprecedented possibilities to alleviate suffering, amplify human capabilities, and explore frontiers of experience and knowledge. It's dangerous because not every technological possibility is necessarily beneficial, and because the power to transform can also be the power to destroy. Technological wisdom requires that we develop sophisticated criteria for evaluating not just the technical feasibility of different development paths, but their human and social desirability. This is particularly challenging because the technologies we're developing may alter the very criteria we use to make these evaluations. How do we judge if artificial cognitive enhancements are beneficial if they change our capacity to make judgments? How do we evaluate if super intelligent artificial intelligences are safe if they may be capable of reasoning that transcends our capacity for understanding? How do we decide which genetic modifications are acceptable if they may alter not just our capabilities, but our values and preferences? These are not questions that can be answered by technical specialists in isolation, nor by politicians or business people motivated primarily by short-term considerations. They require a type of collective deliberation that integrates technical expertise with cultural wisdom, economic considerations with ethical values, and short-term analysis with long-term vision. And they require that we develop new ways of making collective decisions about issues that are simultaneously extremely technically complex and profoundly consequential for humanity's future. What makes 2026 special in this context is that it may be the last moment when we still have enough time to develop these capacities for collective deliberation and decision-making before technological transformations accelerate beyond our ability to consciously influence them. We're not saying we need to resolve all these questions by 2026, but that we need to establish the structures and processes that will allow us to continue dealing with them constructively, even as technologies continue evolving rapidly. This might mean, for example, creating international institutions dedicated specifically to evaluating and governing emerging technologies with potential civilizational impact. It might mean developing new models of public participation in technological decisions that go beyond traditional consultations and public hearings. It might mean establishing ethical principles and regulatory frameworks that are flexible enough to adapt to rapidly evolving technologies, but robust enough to protect fundamental values. And it might mean creating new types of education and culture that prepare people to live constructively and consciously in a world of accelerated technological change. But perhaps most importantly, it might mean recognizing that the future is not something that simply happens to us, but something we create through our collective choices. The technologies we're developing are not inevitable natural forces. They are products of human decisions about research priorities, funding structures, regulatory frameworks, and social norms. This means we still have power to influence the direction of technological development, but only if we exercise that power consciously and collectively. The crucial question is not whether we'll be able to completely stop or control these technological transformations. We probably won't be able to, and perhaps we shouldn't want to, given the enormous potential benefits they offer. The question is whether we'll be able to direct them in ways that maximize their benefits and minimize their risks, so they serve humanity's deepest values and aspirations, rather than simply optimizing abstract, technical, or economic metrics. This requires that we think carefully about what kind of future we really want to create. What kind of society do we want to live in? What human capabilities do we want to amplify? And what limitations do we want to transcend? What relationship do we want to have with the technologies we create? What values do we want to preserve through radical transformations? And what aspects of human experience are we willing to leave behind in favor of new possibilities? These are questions each of us needs to consider individually, but that can only be answered adequately through collective processes of deliberation and decision-making. And here we arrive at an interesting paradox. On one hand, the transformations we're facing are so rapid and complex that they may seem beyond the capacity for understanding and influence of ordinary individuals. On the other hand, precisely because these transformations are products of human decisions, each individual choice about how to use, support, or resist different technologies contributes to the collective momentum that determines our general direction. Your choices about how to integrate artificial intelligence into your professional life, your decisions about what types of medical modifications you consider acceptable for yourself and your family, your preferences about privacy and transparency in algorithmic systems, all these apparently small choices aggregate into social patterns that influence how these technologies develop and are implemented. Moreover, your participation in conversations about these issues, whether in family, professional, or civic contexts, contributes to the collective culture of reflection and deliberation that will be crucial for consciously navigating through these transformations. We don't need to be technical specialists to have valuable perspectives on what kind of future we want to create. In fact, some of the most important questions about technology are questions about values, priorities, and life visions that transcend specialized technical expertise. Therefore, although 2026 may be a year of particular historical importance, it's not a year that will simply happen to us. It's a year we'll create through our collective and individual choices in the coming months and years. And although the transformations we're facing are unprecedented in their speed and scope, we're not without resources to deal with them. We have traditions of wisdom accumulated over millennia of human experience. We have institutions and democratic processes that, while imperfect, offer us mechanisms for collective deliberation and decision-making. We have capacities for reflection, creativity, and adaptation that have allowed us to navigate through previous transformations. And we have each other. Perhaps the most important insight we need to recover is that we're not alone in this process. The anxieties and hopes you feel about the future are shared by millions of other people around the world. The feeling that changes are happening too fast to consciously keep up with is a collective experience, not a personal failure. And the desire to contribute to creating a future that is not just technologically advanced, but humanly wise and beneficial is an impulse that connects people across all cultural, geographical, and ideological boundaries. When we look at 2026 from this perspective, we don't see just a year of inevitable technological transformations, but a year of collective opportunity, an opportunity to apply our accumulated wisdom to the unprecedented challenges we face. an opportunity to create structures and processes that allow us to consciously navigate through accelerated changes, an opportunity to shape emerging technologies so they serve humanity's deepest aspirations, and an opportunity to demonstrate that, even in the face of transformations that test the limits of our adaptive capacity, we can still consciously choose the type of future we want to create. This isn't just a question of optimism versus pessimism about technology. It's a question of responsibility. We have the responsibility to use our collective intelligence and creativity to influence the direction of the transformations we're experiencing. We have the responsibility to think not just about the immediate benefits of new technologies, but about their long-term implications. We have the responsibility to consider not just how these technologies affect us individually, but how they affect our society and our species as a whole. And we have the responsibility to act not just as passive consumers of technological innovations, but as active participants in creating the future. If these reflections have touched on something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you're not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era, and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways to live amid the transformations we're witnessing. This isn't just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this continuous journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. And if these ideas have helped you see our current situation with more clarity, consider liking this video so we can reach other people who are also seeking understanding in times of accelerated change. Because ultimately, 2026 won't be just another year on the calendar. It will be the year when we discover whether we can be wise enough to consciously guide our own technological evolution, or whether we'll simply be swept along by forces we created but cannot control. And the answer to that question depends not just on experts and leaders, but on each of us and the choices we make about how to engage with the extraordinary moment we have the fortune and responsibility to live through. When comparing AI, say, to the threat of nuclear war has no upside. It has no supporters. It's a huge, huge threat, especially in today's world, when we see that countries like Russia are just completely disregarding the biggest taboos of the international system. Since 1945, the biggest taboo of the international system was that a strong country cannot just invade and try to conquer and destroy a weaker country. And now this is broken. So the danger is huge, but at least everybody understands the danger. There are no winners in a nuclear war. With AI, it's a much more complicated challenge. There is a huge positive potential, and people find it very difficult to understand what the threats are. Ever since the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was at least clear to humans what is the danger of nuclear technology. You don't need long explanations. With AI, it's difficult to grasp the danger because it's really an alien threat.
Please welcome Yuval Noah Harari and Sir Stephen Fry.
Goodness me, I wasn't sure anyone would turn up. Isn't this rather exciting? Well, it's a great thrill for me to be with this hero of mine, really, Yuval Noah Harari. I'm sure many of you will have read the book that catapulted his name into world fame, Sapiens. a remarkable history of our species, which involved many, many extraordinary insights and a kind of thrilling narrative of its own. But one of the things, Yuval, that I think many of us were impressed by was the way you showed that perhaps Sapiens was almost the wrong title. It wasn't that we were the wise humanity, but that we were storytelling humanity. That what separated us from the Neanderthals and from other primates and set us on our course was the fact that we told stories about ourselves and about the world as we apprehended it. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And would you say that this is both what gets us into trouble, because a story is also another word for a lie, and also what propels us into a stable future?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword in this regard, which becomes particularly important in the age of AI, because for the first time in history, we encounter a better storyteller than we are. We took over the planet not because we are more intelligent than the other animals, but because we can cooperate better. And we cooperate through storytelling. And you know, you have the obvious examples like religions, but my favorite example is money, which is probably the greatest story ever invented, ever told, because it's the only one everybody believes, or almost everybody. I mean, humans. No other animal on the planet knows that money even exists, because it only exists in our imagination. But now there is another thing on the planet that knows that money exists, and that can maybe invent new kinds of money and new kinds of other stories. And what will happen to us when we have to deal, you know, it's not just with one better storyteller, but with billions of better storytellers than us on this planet. That's, I think, one of the biggest questions of our age.
Yes, and you're talking, of course, about AI, and it's recently come to light that one of the large language model corporations, Anthropic, has revealed that its latest instance of Claude was, in a closed test, was seen to blackmail some people in order to achieve a goal. And when we think about AI, we either get very dismissive of it. It's merely a parrot repeating probable instances of human communication, a stochastic parrot, as Emily Bender, the computational linguist, famously called it. It's every time it gives you a sentence, no matter how intelligent it appears, it is merely following a probabilistic route.
The question is it not the same with us?
Yeah, exactly.
When I look at the way sentences are formed in my own mind, like now when I'm talking with you, I don't know how the sentence will end. I start saying something, and the words just keep bubbling up in the mind. And as a public speaker, it's something terrifying, because I don't know if I will be able to complete the sentence. I'm not sure what will be the next word.
That's right. You're talking and you're trying to make sense, and suddenly you've come up with lettuce. Where did that happen? You know, it's an unrolling carpet. Syntagmatic, I think, is the technical word for it.
And the amazing thing with AI, you can now ask the AI to show you exactly how it thinks. You can actually watch how the logic unfolds in the AI in a way which is very difficult for us to do with our own minds. But we can now do, I mean, the AIs don't have minds, at least as far as we know, but we can see how the sentences, the stories are being formed in their, whatever we call it.
If we ask them to, but the fact is, I've spoken to people like Geoffrey Hinton and people who are called the godfather of AI, and they would say that the most disturbing fact about these current models is that nobody knows what's going on under the hood. They don't actually know how it's doing what it's doing.
If we could know everything that's going on there and predict it, it wouldn't be AI.
That's the point.
I mean,
exactly.
if you have something that you can predict how it will behave, what decisions it will make, what ideas it will invent, by definition, this is not AI. This is just an automatic machine.
The way to make that clearer, perhaps, is to recognize that AI now can beat, just on your phone, any chess player in the world. And you obviously can't predict the moves it's going to make, because if you could predict the moves it was going to make, you would beat it, or it would be a stalemate every time. And you expand that to the whole of AI. You don't know what it's going to say or do, which is why it's a useful tool. If it could only match what we did, it would be not a tool. It would be like saying that a digger, a JCB, could only dig as much as a human with a spade. The point is we have these machines to outmatch what we can do, yeah?
I think that's the main point. Both the main promise of AI is to be better than us at decision-making in many fields, that it would be able to invent things that we cannot think about, but that is also the main threat. That we cannot predict how it will behave, and we cannot control it in advance. No matter how much we try to make it safe, to align it with our aims, with our goals, I think it really goes to the heart of what AI is.
Yes.
That usually we think about AI as an acronym for artificial intelligence. But it's no longer artificial. If you think about what an artifact is something that we create and we control. With each passing day, AI is becoming less and less artificial, which is why I prefer to think about AI as an acronym for alien intelligence. It is, even the word, in a way, a true intelligence is never an artifact, because an artifact is something that you create and control, whereas intelligence is characterized by the ability to create new things.
You used a verb there very quickly, but it's worth expanding on it, and that was align. And for those of us who are concerned, shall we say, about how AI is going, one of the main problems is what is known as the alignment problem. There's a simple way of looking at it, which is an old philosophical thought experiment called the genie. So if you imagine a genie who gives you a wish, and you love life and you're an empathetic person, so you say to the genie, can you really bring any wish true? And they say, yes. You say, in that case, could you end all suffering? And instantly, all life on the planet is extinguished. Because to the genie, they look at the world, and all suffering comes in form of life. All forms of life suffer. Smallest animals and us. That's the only place where suffering exists. Stones, as far as the genie is concerned, don't suffer. Maybe trees do, it's not sure, but if it gets rid of all life, it has solved our problem, and it bows and says, there you are, master. Now, that's a very broad sense of the alignment problem. We asked a very stupid question. We didn't think it through. But the fact is, yes, we have to understand AI and alien, but we really have to understand ourselves in order, because we don't have shared ethical frameworks around the world. How do you encode dignity, love, sympathy, passion, joy, equality? We've only just learned, if you like, recently that women's and men's lives and dignities are equal, and that people of different races are equal. We've only just discovered this. And there are many other things we aren't sure about. And how, therefore, can we expect the machines to be sure? And therefore, we ask them a question, and it might do an equivalent of what the genie does. How do you see a solution to that?
Well, one of the other key things about AI, because it can learn and change by itself, so whatever we teach it, we cannot be certain that it will always just comply by our instructions. Again, if it only does what we tell it to do, it's not really an AI. So when we think about the alignment problem, or how to educate AI to be benevolent and not harmful, it's a very problematic and imperfect analogy, but I think it's still useful to think about AI as a child, as the child of humanity. And what we know about educating children is that they never do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you do. Yes. If you tell a child, don't lie, and then the child observes you lying and cheating other people, it will copy your behavior, not follow your instructions. Now, if we have, the kind of people who are leading the AI revolution, telling the AI, don't lie, but the AI observes them, observes the world, and sees them lying and cheating and manipulating, it will do the same. Yeah. I mean, if AI is developed not through a cooperative effort of humans who trust each other, but it is developed through an arms race, a competition. So again, you can tell the AI as much as you like to be compassionate and to be benevolent, but if it observes the world, because AI learns from observation. Yes. Yeah. If it observes the world, it observes how humans behave towards each other, it observes how its own creators behave. And if they are ruthless, power-hungry competitors, it will also be ruthless and power-hungry. You cannot create a compassionate and trustworthy AI through an arms race. It just won't happen.
Well, yes, Yuval, you've said this. If you had said this in 1980 during what was known as the AI winter, we'd say, yes, we must plan and make sure this isn't happening. But it's already happening. There is an arms race. The very people who are spending the billions and billions are the same people, for example, Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, who gave us the disaster of Facebook and social media and what it has done to the polity of the world and to the poverty of the world, to essentially, in this country, as we know, the rivers are polluted and contaminated. You wouldn't swim in any river in Britain because there's raw sewage being poured into it. Well, our children are breathing a cultural river, which is similarly polluted and contaminated. And we all know this, and Facebook knows this, and Twitter and X know this, but they do nothing about it. And if you even mention guardrails and regulation, they scream communism. And Trump has just announced that he will ban individual states in America from regulating AI. There is an arms race. So everything you said is happening. So how can we come together to stop AI in the hands of corporate greed and national greed in this arms race, whether it's China against America or it's one company against another? It's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's moving very fast, partly because there is also enormous positive potential, of course. In everything from healthcare to tackling the climate emergency. Yes. So we have to acknowledge there is also this enormous positive potential. The question is not how to stop the development of AI, it's how to make sure that it is used for good. And here, I think that the main problem is simply an issue of priority, of what comes first. Humanity now faces two major challenges. On the one hand, we have the challenge of developing a super intelligent AI. On the other hand, we have the challenge of how to rebuild trust between humans, because trust all over the world, both between countries and also within countries, is collapsing. Nobody is absolutely certain why it's happening, but everybody is able to observe it. I mean, maybe the last thing that, let's say, Republicans and Democrats in the US can agree on is that trust is collapsing.
Yes.
It's that they don't trust each other. They don't agree on any fact except that they don't trust each other.
So this is the worst possible time for us to come together. We no longer believe in global institutions like the United Nations, the WHO.
Even in national institutions.
Yes.
I mean, one of the explanations for the collapse of trust is that over thousands of years, I mean, humans have been amazing in building, despite all the conflicts and tensions and so forth. 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of hunter-gatherers and could not trust anybody outside their band of 50 or 100 individuals. Now we have nations of hundreds of millions of people. We have a global trade network, a global scientific network with billions of people. So we are obviously quite good at building trust.
Yeah.
But over thousands of years, we have built trust through human communication. And now, within almost every relationship, there is a machine, an algorithm, an AI in between. And we see a collapse of trust in humans, whereas there is a rise of trust in algorithms and AIs. Again, I mentioned money as the greatest story ever told. So you see that people are losing trust in human-made money, like euros and dollars and pounds, but they shift the trust
from fiat to
cryptocurrencies and to an algorithm-based money. So we have these two problems of the developing AI and rebuilding trust between humans. And the question is which one we solve first, which is the priority. Now, unfortunately, you hear some of the smartest people in the world, they say, first we solve the AI problem, and then with the help of AI, we'll solve the trust problem. And I think this is a very bad idea. If we develop AI through an arms race between humans who can't trust each other, there is absolutely no reason to expect that we'll be able to trust the AIs. I mean, the big paradox is that when you talk with people like Mark Zuckerberg, like Elon Musk, they often say openly that they are also afraid of the dangerous potential of AI. They are not blind to it, they are not oblivious to it, but they say that they are caught in this arms race, that if I slow down, my competitors will not slow down, I can't trust them, so I must move faster. But then you ask them, okay, so you can't trust your human competitors. Do you think you'll be able to trust this super intelligent alien intelligence you're developing? And the same people who just told you they can't trust other humans tell you, oh, but I think we'll be able to trust the alien AIs, which is almost insane. So the right order of doing it is first solve the human trust problem, then together, in a cooperative way, we can develop and educate trustworthy AIs. But unfortunately, we are doing the exact opposite.
Yes. And there's, as you know, there's been for decades the doomsday clock, which the nuclear scientists set midnight is Armageddon, the end of everything. And it's been roughly at 89 seconds to midnight for the last few years. It's crept up over recent days for obvious reasons. But there's another metric that I've been studying recently called P-doom. It's the letter P, which is probability, brackets, doom, close brackets. It's one used by people in the business, so, you know, the scientists in AI. So, for example, Alicia Yudkowsky, who's the founder of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute in California, sets P at 90. That's to say, a 90% chance of human extinction through AI. Jan LeCun, who is the chief scientist for Meta, sets it at 0. But then he is the chief scientist for Meta. So that's like a tobacco executive saying, cancer? No chance. What are you talking about? Can't possibly happen. But so I've worked out that roughly the lowest median is between 7.5% and 10% of human catastrophe of an extinction order through AI, if things are not controlled in the way you say they should be. Now, the chance of winning the lottery in this country is 0.0000022%. So what you're saying here is that the chance of human extinction at 7.5%, which is the lowest really amongst the current important scientists, Nobel Prize winners like Hinton and Hassabis. 7.5% is 3.4 million times greater than 0.00022%. So if I were to give you a lottery ticket and say this is a valid lottery ticket, the only difference is you are 3.4 million times more likely to win, you would take it. And that's the odds we're playing with at a low rate. So let's look at the bad side of things. As we've said, we're going about it in the wrong order, as you've put it. Most people who understand the science say there is a very severe chance that humanity will be extinguished by this, a greater chance than by nuclear Armageddon, in fact, or indeed climate change. And humans are not in a position at the moment to trust each other and to establish guardrails, to agree on how we should go forward. So do you have a solution for us? I'm almost on my knees begging you at this point. I don't have children, so I can almost say I don't care. But I have lots of godchildren, and I have lots of great nieces and great nephews, so I do care about what happens to our planet. And I'm sure you do too.
Again, I think that it's very dangerous to think too much about, kind of doomsday and extinction scenarios. They cause people to despair. We do have what it takes to manage this revolution because we are creating it. This is not the dinosaurs being extinguished by an asteroid coming from outer space that they have no way of even understanding, let alone controlling. This is a process which, at least for now, is under human control. In 5 years, in 10 years, we will have millions and even billions of AI agents taking more and more decisions, inventing more and more ideas. It will be a hybrid society. So it will become more difficult, but we need to start with the realization that this is a completely human-made danger. We have everything we need in order to manage it. The main missing ingredient is trust between human beings. And again, over tens of thousands of years, we have demonstrated that we are capable of building trust, even on a global level. Yes. So it's not beyond our capabilities. And it then goes back, to the old questions of politics and ethics, of how do you build trust between human beings. And we need to think also about more kind of concrete and immediate questions. One of the biggest questions we will be facing in the next few years is how to deal with these new AI agents.
Yes.
Do we consider them as persons? Mm-hmm. More and more people are entering relationships, personal relationships with AIs. More and more corporations and armies are giving AIs control, agency over important decisions. This is not some kind of philosophical question.
No,
it's a
real.
Completely should AIs have the ability to open a bank account and manage a bank account? Yeah. That's a very practical question. We are very close to the point when you can tell an AI, go out there, make money. Your goal is to make $1 billion. Yeah. In computer science, very often the difficult question is, how do you define the goal? Yeah. And one of the things about money, it's a very easy goal to define. Yeah. Now, an AI can make money in many ways. It can hire its services to people to write their essays or books or whatever, many things it can do. It can earn money. It can then invest this money in the stock exchange. Yeah. So do we as a society want to allow AI agents, and then this is not a question for 50 years, this is a question for 5 years, maybe 1 year, to open bank accounts and manage them in any way they see fit. Yeah. In the US, basically, the legal system, they never thought about it, but I'm not sure about the situation in the UK, but in the US, there is an open legal path for AIs to be recognized as persons with rights.
Yes, Pete Singer has written about this and
Because,
others.
in the according to US law, corporations are persons and they have rights like freedom of speech.
Yes.
Now, so in the US, you can incorporate an AI. Previously, when you incorporated a corporation like Google or General Motors or whatever, this was a fiction.
Yeah.
Because all the decisions of Google were made by human beings.
Yes.
So, okay, legally, Google is a person with rights, but every decision of Google needs a human executive, accountant, engineer, lawyer to make the decision. Yeah. Now this is no longer the case. You can incorporate an AI, and the AI can make the decisions by itself.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that the US Supreme Court recognized corporations as persons is in order to make it possible for corporations to donate money to politicians. This was the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. Right. Now, so imagine an AI that makes billions of dollars. It's maybe the richest person in the US in a few years will not be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg. It will be an AI.
Yeah.
And this AI has the freedom of speech, which includes the right to donate money to politicians, maybe on condition that they further advance rights for AI.
Absolutely, and reduce guardrails and so forth. Yes.
Now, this is a completely realistic scenario. This is not like science fiction.
No, absolutely.
So, and this is a question that we as a society need to decide, do we acknowledge AIs as persons with rights? Now, there are people who are already convinced that AIs, because they have interaction with them, have consciousness, have feelings. So maybe in a few years, the world is divided between countries that recognize AIs as persons with rights and countries that don't.
Absolutely. And I suppose for everyone in the room, there's a consideration. I remember I gave a talk on AI back in 2015 in Hay-on-Wye, and I said that the way things are going, there are certain jobs that people might not have. I said, for example, if you have a child who's studying to be a doctor, that's fine, but maybe a radiologist. And woman put her hand up very crossly and said, my daughter's studying radiology. And I said, well, you know, imagine that every mammogram ever taken is available to an AI and it can examine thousands in a second and make a judgment on it. A radiologist is going to go out of work. Now, who's going to go out of work here? I don't know if the chief financial officer is president of Octopus, but I have been sort of talking to some people who say that the first really high-level job to be replaced by an AI completely will be a CFO. They can be so well, everything they do.
It's already happened. It's news editors.
Oh, really?
One of the most important jobs in the 20th century, even before, was news editors. Yeah. The editors of the newspapers, of the television, they were extremely powerful people who control the public conversation.
Yeah. But I think what I would just end by saying to everybody is maybe don't concentrate on how efficient you are, on how brilliantly you complete a task, because that's what AI can do, especially the agentic AI that Yuval's been talking about. Concentrate on what a wonderful human being you are, how kind you are, how courteous, how considerate, how you improve the life of those around you, which is very often the opposite of what efficient people do. And maybe that, for the time being, at least, is the secret, that human exceptionalism will be how good we are as people, how much we make a room light up when we walk into it, how much pleasure we spread, not how quickly we can complete a task, because we'll never match the AI. So on that note, at least I think we should end, and I hope we haven't given too much terror to everybody. I will always say that the thing about this technology is it's simultaneously thrilling and chilling. And the thrilling parts may well cause us all to live much longer, happier lives. We can hope so. But Yuval, as always, an absolute joy speaking to you, and thank you for...
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Philosophers like Charles Taylor and psychologists and others, they looked into this kind of mental atom of the self and realized, like the physical atom, it's not solid at all. It contains not just multitude of subparticles, but they are constantly moving and interacting and changing.
Did it help you understand something about yourself?
Yes, that and what I define as myself itself needs a lot more exploration. You think you know yourself, but you don't. Not just, the kind of individual events of your life. Your very understanding of what is a self is far from self-evident. And it is itself the product of a lot of stories and mythologies which are not necessarily true.